What's going on, everybody? It's your boy C-Zar, and we are talking about MSTR strategy today. Hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and let's get into it, my friends. We're just a few minutes into the new day here, this Monday, the 20th day of October, and here we are sitting at about $300, up 3.6% on the day so far, leaving behind a little bit of a gap, and that's okay. MicroStrategy typically, or strategy, I should say, typically does leave behind gaps, especially whenever it's moving up. It's very possible that we do come back down and fill this gap. I think it's something to be aware of that, if Bitcoin sees some volatility, maybe MSTR does as well. But I'm very confident that we are at, if not very near the low right now. And it's articles like this one. I'm not subscribed, so I can't read, but I don't know why. It let me read before, and now it won't let me read. But this article here, retail buyers lost $17 billion on Bitcoin hype after stock crash. This article is all about how anybody investing in treasuries, crypto treasuries, Bitcoin treasuries specifically, have lost money, and that the average investor or the total investments lost is $17 billion. If we could actually read this article, which I don't know why, it let me read it before, and I'm not just talking about this part here, but I'm talking about the whole article. It's not letting me read it now. It wants me to subscribe, and I don't want to subscribe. Maybe I should, though, because it's really not that much. It talks about how retail investors have lost, and that treasury companies for crypto are a fad. They were here, they were hot, and now they're not, and they're all dying, and they're all going to go away, right? They were talking about companies like Strategy, 21 Capital, Metaplanet, all kinds of different companies, and putting a negative spin on it. You guys know how I feel whenever we get negative news like that. Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how this whole time, this whole entire time, Bitcoin treasury companies, crypto treasury companies were hot. They were a hot topic. Everybody wanted, either you wanted to invest in one or you wanted to turn your company into one, right? That was the hot thing. And now Bloomberg, one of these larger financial institutions as far as like analytics go, they are saying that treasury companies are dead. Isn't it funny how that happens right here at the low point of this overall range? It's not the lowest point, to be fair, but the low point of this overall range, one of the low points here, right before Bitcoin and the rest of the market is actually about to move higher. Isn't it funny that since April, this is the highest that the fear and greed has been, right? And it's at this point in time that now Bitcoin treasury companies are dead. That makes me think if the news is bearish, if they're saying get away from Bitcoin treasury companies, then it's time to buy. Whenever Bloomberg's telling you Bitcoin treasury companies are the best, everybody should sell their house and buy one, or buy some stock in it. Just buy a whole company. That's whenever we should be worried. That's whenever the price is likely going to top off. I do believe that we have a lot of growth to go, but there are some concerns that I want to address before we get to those more bullish aspirations. Okay, so looking here, and I'm just going to delete this because it's worthless. MSTR optionscharts.io strategy. The expirations here, if we're looking at this, the put to call ratio is still heavy on the calls, right? Still heavy on the calls. We've got a lot of calls here, and the expiration for this week, the 24th. The put to call ratio is 0.72. We want to see these puts outweigh the calls. We got to stop having the calls outweigh the puts. Until that happens, I'm very confident that MSTR is going to have a hard time moving higher. Now, that doesn't mean it can't move higher. We can have calls be dominant and still move higher. But typically, whenever you have a call dominant open interest or expirations, call options, right? Whenever you have a call dominant options expiration, I don't know what the right word would be. Typically, that's preventative of the price going higher. Typically, you would expect to see some kind of retracement or even boring price action until that goes away. And throughout this whole range, we've had a very call dominant outlook. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if we did meander a little bit more. Something happens to waver these calls, bring on the puts, right? People read those Bloomberg articles or other articles saying that treasury companies are no longer a thing that anybody should invest in. They might take heed to that and then make the wrong decisions, go short at the lows, go short at the worst time when Bitcoin and the rest of the market's about to rally. But again, the reality of this is calls, puts, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It matters, don't get me wrong, but if Bitcoin goes higher, and that article that I deleted too, what they said was that these companies are largely overvalued. And it was someone, they didn't give any reason for that. They just gave an analyst's name. they're like, this guy thinks this. And it's like, who cares? Who cares if he thinks this? He might not even mean that. He might have just said that for the article. But saying that treasury companies are largely overvalued, maybe some of them are, maybe some of them aren't. Who am I to say? But what I do believe is that when Bitcoin starts to rally, whenever Bitcoin sees new all-time highs, this thing is going to move with it. It's going to continue to rally as well, right? I mean, here, whenever we were pumping going into the beginning of October, Bitcoin was pumping too, right? Going into the beginning of October, pumping at the same time. Now, just because Bitcoin saw new all-time highs doesn't mean MSTR has to see new all-time highs. I'm just saying if and when Bitcoin begins to rally, which should be soon, we're in the midst of it now even. MicroStrategy is going to have a hard time moving down. I don't care how many puts or calls there are, right? But again, I think you'll have an easier time moving up when the sentiment changes, when people are more fearful and less bullish on MSTR. That's likely when we'll see the most growth, right? Because throughout this whole range, people have been just nothing but bullish, and that might be our problem. Because we all know where it's going to go. We all know where Bitcoin's going to go, therefore we all know where this is going to go. It's going to go higher, right? Looking at the weekly time frame here, it's very obvious that we are in a long-term consolidation phase here. I thought that we were in a bull flag back here, all the way back here. Right, thought we were in a bull flag. We broke out, had all the reasons to believe that we were going to move up higher then, going into June or July, reaching a top price of $1,100. But the reality is, guys, we've consolidated a whole lot longer. We're more likely in a horizontal channel is what it is. Some blemishes to the upside, some blemishes to the downside, but more or less a horizontal channel. If you don't want to call it a horizontal channel, then we can call it a wedge, whatever you want to call it. But a consolidation phase nonetheless up here. Okay. The fact that we've consolidated now for basically a year, I wouldn't be surprised if this next move was really the largest move that we see if it was something that took us well above $1,000, right? $1,100 was a target for a very long time, but now we're really strongly considering higher targets than that, right? Something that is larger than any move that we've seen this cycle, right? From a low to a high here, that was a pretty big move. From maybe not the low here, but when the move started, it would be like this low to this high. That was a pretty big move as well, right? Let's actually compare these moves here. They're very similar. Very, very, right? I would think that the move that we're about to see is larger than either of them. The target would be 1,400 if we were to see the same move as the last move here. But if we take this high to low, the next fib level in correspondence to this would be about 1,600. I think with all this time, where originally the target area was $1,100 to $1,300, that was the target area. I think now it's completely acceptable to consider a $1,600 to $2,100 area. And we've talked about this zone. This is something that we've considered throughout this time as well as an inevitable target that we will see. But because of how long we've consolidated here, I really wouldn't be surprised if one of two things happened. Okay, one, this was your cycle ending finale. You stop at 1,600, 2,100, that's your cycle ending finale somewhere in this range for MSTR, and it happens between now and, let's say, February, okay? Or option two, maybe you see this happen by January or December. Maybe it happens by the end of this year. You consolidate, and then you have one last little rally going into 2026. I have a problem with this. Not because I think crypto's not going to pump that long. I think Bitcoin, I think altcoins, Ethereum, I think everything's going to pump. We're going to find our cycle top in crypto in March, April, May, or June. In one of those months there. Either the very end of Q1 or sometime in Q2, and likely in Q2 is what my thoughts are. I just have a hard time seeing MSTR move up with crypto at that point, right? Because last cycle, we topped off well ahead of Bitcoin's high, right? Bitcoin topped off in November, and even the end of the bull market even happened in, right? Like if we go all the way back here, right? This was the end of the bull market. We topped off in November, but the end of the bull market was basically here in March, okay? Then we moved sideways. We did have the top in November, but the end of the bull market was in March. This is not bull market, right? This is bull market. MSTR topped off here in February, a month earlier. So if I'm expecting Bitcoin, I'm expecting altcoins to top off March, April, May, June, then I would expect Bitcoin to top off somewhere in February, March, April, May, somewhere in that time frame, probably February, March, or April, if I had to guess, which would then imply MSTR likely tops off a month or two before Bitcoin. That's all I'm trying to say. Bitcoin topped off a month after this, or a month and a half after this, MSTR likely tops off before the rest of the market again. Does that mean that it goes into an immediate bear market? No. We moved sideways too until November. And then we started off the bear market the same as the rest of the crypto market in November of 2021. Okay? But all I'm trying to say here is this thought, right? This thought, and I feel like I'm saying it poorly, but we're getting to the main juice of it here, is that this next move that we're about to see when we break out of this range, because we are absolutely going to break out of this range to the upside, this next move is likely going to be our cycle-ending finale for MSTR. It likely will be. So that coincides well with the idea that this will likely be our biggest move, cycle-ending finale. We're going to end with a bang. There's doubt. Bloomberg and other analysts, financial analytical companies are doubting Bitcoin treasury companies and throwing shade at companies like MSTR. Right? It's the perfect time to buy in. Right? Sentiment isn't completely negative. We're still call heavy, but still it's more negative than it's been in a while, and not just for MSTR, but for the underlying asset, Bitcoin itself as well. Right? We've got some high levels of fear and greed indexes at some low points here as far as fear goes, or high points as far as fear goes, low points as far as the actual points go. I would just think that this next move, topping off either in December or January or maybe February, however the timing goes, is likely going to be the end of it. And again, the thought here, we're going to do it one more time, the thought here is that this move will be bigger and it will be the finale move in comparison to either of these two moves. So the thought is that also this move would be at a very similar tempo, at a very similar pace. Okay, I doubt that we're going to move at a significantly slower pace, and if we're going to see a bigger move overall, I would think that we keep up a very similar pace, but again, we see something larger. So these moves, if we were to repeat them from here at least, that would take us into the end of this year, into the beginning of January, the very last week of December, the first week of January, we'd be at about $1,300. You take a high to a low here, the next target area to consider would really be $1,500, right? Is that right? That's not right. Let's see. Sorry. Let me get it at the low. It's very, very, very touchy here. Let me see here. Come on, you. There we go. $1,600. Typically with the 2272, you do go just above there, and perhaps you don't stop. Maybe you go all the way up to 2,100. And right, if we're at this pace, that could be, sometime in February or March that we're up here. It would make a lot of sense that even if we don't start this week right now, it could start next week, it could start the week after, but when we start this move, whenever it is official, sometime in the coming weeks probably, we're likely not stopping until we're worth $1,600 or more, and I think this is our cycle-ending target area. For a long time, I assumed, and back here, whenever we thought that this was the consolidation range, right? We just had this bull flag. For a long time, we thought that we'd get one move, we'd consolidate, and then we'd get one more move after that. That's how we thought it was going to be. But now, because we've consolidated for so long, we only have so much time left in the cycle, it's incredibly likely that this next move is the last move for MicroStrategy until the next bear market, right? So place your bets, get set, likely by the end of Q1, if not earlier in Q1, or even by the end of this year, MSTR will find its top, and that should be at $1,600 to $2,100. Can it go higher? Yes, $2,700 to $3,200 is possible, but I feel very confident about $1,600 to $2,100. Anyways, I got nothing else for you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, hit the like button, subscribe, take care of yourselves. Thank you all for being here. The weekly RSI is the weakest it's been in years, literally since 2022, December. The weekly RSI is the weakest it's been since our bear market lows. Can you believe it? That's crazy. And we're up here. Wow. You've taken a serious reprieve, haven't you? Stochastics are the weakest in the exact same form. Look at that. It's the weakest that they've been. Yes, you were this week before, but in and out. Stochastics weakness are measured not just by the depth, but by the length of time. The MACD is even, I would say, more bearish, or just as bearish, right? We were just below the zero here. We're just below the zero here on the oscillators. Very deep histogram. You're the most bearish you've been since your bear market lows. That should tell you everything you need to know. We've got more to go, okay? That doesn't mean we're about to start a whole nother cycle, right? We haven't seen a bear market yet. This is just a large consolidation phase, but we likely do. Isn't it funny, actually, how much this, I feel like this looks similar to this here. Different, but very similar. I wonder how many people have actually looked at this and said, you know what? This means we're going down. Don't buy that FUD, man. That's some BS FUD right there. It's not the same. It looks similar because of this point here. That's the only reason it looks similar, really. But it's different. It is completely different. Anyways, guys, I'm getting lost in the translation. All I'm trying to say here is that we're bullishly postured, right, in all these indicators. We're likely going to be moving up higher any day now, any week now. Just hold on to your hats because the ride is going to be very swift to the upside. Hit the like button, subscribe, take care of yourselves. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.